Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Your Mark on the World show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. I'm a Forbes contributor covering social entrepreneurship and impact investing. And our guest today joins us all the way from India. Atul Satija is the founder and CEO of the Nudge Foundation. You don't want to miss this episode.
Welcome to Your Mark on the World, bringing you another changemaker with champion of social good, Devin D. Thorpe.
Atul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Devin. Thanks for having me here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. Please tell us about the Nudge Foundation.
Yeah. So Devin, I started the Nudge about 2.5 years back after about 17, 18 years in the regular corporate sector. I spent my first 18 years doing various corporate gigs, small startups that I built and sold, worked with organizations like Google and Adobe and Samsung. Did a small startup that went on to become one of India's first few unicorns. And then, I had this sort of long-term dream to be in the development sector. And that's what I kind of spent time along with my day job in various corporates, harboring over the evenings and weekends, volunteering, donating for various organizations. And 2.5 years back, I thought it's a good timing for me to shift and cross over to the development sector for the second half of my work life. So Nudge is about 2.5 years old. We are a development sector startup, as we like to call ourselves. And the broad mission of Nudge is poverty alleviation, but it's inspired by Taylor's book that, there are so many sort of powerful ways to nudge people to pull themselves out of poverty. And we bring a lot of those principles into the work that we do. So on the ground, there are two different projects that we are working on. One big thing is a grassroots project where we work with the underprivileged youth, 18 to 25 years of age, and we bring them into a fully residential environment that we call Gurukuls, where they stay with us for 90 days. And over these 90 days, we focus on the foundation repair that these youth need, having dropped out of schools and colleges. So it's been 2.5 years now. We started with the first Gurukul in 15 November. And in this journey now we have scaled to about 9 such Gurukuls, graduating about 2,000 students a year, all in Bangalore in India. And the model is now continuing to scale. We work with partners like Cisco and KPMG and Wells Fargo Bank and Book a Smile and Sapient and Emphasis, HSBC, HDFC. So all these corporates come together from their CSR lens and support us with one Gurukul or a few Gurukuls each for a period of 1 to 3 years. So it's been a very fascinating 3-year journey of getting support from all of these people to build what we do.
But it's a remarkable scale that you've achieved. How did you bring all of this together and implement it so quickly? When I think of corporations like the ones you partnered with, I think of them being a little bit slow. And yet you've moved with remarkable speed to scale up something. How have you combined the resources of these corporations with an entrepreneurial energy to make this all happen so fast?
Yeah. So Devin, it's very interesting. I think there are two things. One is one of the core values of the Nudge is what we say, impatience towards our goals. It's a very unusual part of a value where you say impatience is a part of our value. But I think people associate development sector organizations with lack of speed. And we chose this sort of controversial value of the organization as impatience, not to say that we don't see our pilots to their logical conclusion or we don't have the time to experiment and learn and think through things. But it just became like a big thing in the organization to internally realize that speed to scale is important to us. And hence we won't be sitting there twiddling our thumbs, worrying about issues. It's more important to launch and iterate. I think that comes from the tech sector sort of iterative models. That's one thing that we very carefully harbored in the organization as a value. I think what also worked for us is this entire CSR tailwind in India, where the government sort of through law mandated all organizations with a certain profit to actually allocate 2% of their profits to social work. And because of that tailwind, we saw a lot of money in the market where people were looking for credible organizations to support. And at the same timing, we were about starting up, looking for support like that. And I think it all came together for us, a bit of timing, a bit of design.
How do you measure your impact, and how are you doing against your goals for impact?
Yeah. So Devin, coming from data and technology background, we measure everything, right? From how many students we sign up, to how many students show up, to how many students stay in the Gurukul on day 7 versus graduation, how many sit for placements, how do we place them, and then what are the learning outcomes improvement as well as the downstream impact. So we measure everything from input to outcome to impact. We have a goal of 1 million people out of poverty, and that's what we're working towards. We have a sort of rough timelines, not super defined, but that's the goal we're working towards. Obviously, the number that I mentioned, 2,000 students here, is a very, very small number in that journey, but that's a direct impact, and we have a leveraged impact model through an incubator that we run, which also I'll come to in a while. The way we look at our impact as Gurukul is that one key sort of leading indicator of impact is what is the learning improvement we are able to bring about in the students we bring. So we measure the learning outcomes very, very carefully for every single student. That's one. Second is how many students are we able to place in jobs. Very happy to report that we have a 99% students in placed, better than most B schools globally. All the 2,000 students we graduated, more than 99% of them have been offered a job. Obviously, not everyone we offer a job ends up joining. Some actually feel inspired enough to go back and finish their education. Some go on to do entrepreneurship, and the remaining kind of go into jobs. So the numbers vary, but we have never had a problem at our current scale to find jobs for the people that we skill. And that speaks to the quality of the program.
What is the most important lesson you've learned over the last several years working on this project?
I think there are a lot of unknowns when you're working with people. And I think we all walk into our projects thinking we know a lot more than we actually do, unless we get our hands and feet dirty. So for me, it's been a bittersweet journey in this sector. The entire journey was built on we need to be like a child in a classroom, just open to learning every single day. And there are cases where we walk in and created these policies and rules, and we realized that they didn't make sense at all for the beneficiaries and the customers we were serving. The first Gurukul, we had the rules inside the facilities that we as students ourselves could not live with, right? I had difficulty with my faculty living with those rules. So we kind of had to do an entire overhaul of the entire sort of behavior management system in these facilities. And then we launched something called karma point system, where students get a certain karma points, and at 0 they know they'll be fired. A lot of these things happen because just when you open yourselves up to mistakes and learning, there is enough context around you to teach what you don't know. I think that's been the most important thing we learned in this journey.
Now, your background wasn't in kind of the social arena, wasn't in education, wasn't in nonprofits. You've been working in the tech sector. You talked about that. You're an entrepreneur. What possessed you to suddenly shift gears and focus on this massive effort to give back and make the world a better place?
Yeah. So Devin, unlike most people, for me it was reasonably meditated. It felt very natural when I took the decision, but I grew up in a lower income sort of family in India. And even though I had a reasonably safe childhood, I still all through my life had my cousins come and live with us because they didn't have any better place to go. Their parents wouldn't be able to take care of them. And I saw my dad give back despite having very little overall. And I think somewhere I formed that sort of, I think I just got it from him saying, I'll retire, I'll make enough money and then I'll retire and do development sector work. But I think that notion of giving back kept slipping into my career from 60s to 50s to 40s. So early 30s when I was working with Google is when I started feeling like I'm kind of cheating myself, not doing anything in the sector at all as a volunteer either. So I started volunteering for an organization and part donating to that organization in my free time. And as a board member and chair of that organization is how I learned the sector for 2.5 years. So from my early 30s of volunteering to late 30s full-time into it, I think my 30s was sort of the decade of transition personally for me.
Fantastic. Atul, what is your superpower?
Well, I think, funny and interesting question. I think to me personally, I just cannot be in office if I'm not really enjoying my work. I actually left 8 jobs in my first 7 years, right? And I was exactly in the opposite mode of just not knowing what I was doing with my life. And I think I'm in the opposite place now where I feel so much at peace knowing what I will be doing for the rest of my life, right? With no sense of urgency. I think it is just that I'm a super passionate guy for what I want to spend time in, and then it just possesses me. And it's just hard work and commitment to what I really want to do. And I feel lucky that I found that passion to work on development sector as my calling and spending all my time into it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Atul, we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Before you go, please take a moment to tell people how they can learn more about the Nudge Foundation and connect with you personally.
Yeah. I would request everyone to actually log on to the nudge.org, which is a website for the work that we do. We also run, as I briefly mentioned, an incubator for nonprofits called encore.thenudge.org, where we support other organizations with seed grants and mentorship for them to start their own journeys. You can personally write to me at atul@thenudge.org. And I'll be super happy to hear from you. And if there is any way I can support any one of you in starting your own giving journeys, I'll feel personally very, very fulfilled. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Atul. We wish you every success in the great work that you're doing. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, David, for having me.
All righty. Let's do some good.
Thank you for listening. This podcast was recorded via Google Hangouts on Air and is available at youtube.com/Devin Thorpe. Subscribe to this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes by searching for Your Mark on the World. Every weekday, Devin hosts a CEO, celebrity, entrepreneur, or other changemaker here on the Your Mark on the World show to inspire and prepare you to make your mark. Devin is a champion of social good, writing about, advocating for, and advising people who are doing good. He is a Forbes contributor who is a recognized thought leader in social entrepreneurship, impact investing, and crowdfunding. To book Devin as a speaker, visit devinthorpe.com. Learn more about Devin's work at yourmarkontheworld.com.